This is a lesson for Chapter 9, or Chapter 3, Section 9. It's applying Pythagorean's theorem and its converse. And so I think we know what Pythagorean's theorem is because we've used it before. It's just that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and that's what it says. So it says right up here, the Pythagorean theorem says if a triangle is right, then the square of the two legs being added together. So a squared, so if we look at a triangle here, we've got a right angle, and so the two sides connected by the right angle are A and B. The side opposite the right angle is C. And if we square the two sides connected by the right angle and add them together, it'll equal the square of the hypotenuse, the longest side. Well, the converse kind of takes that if-then statement and turns it around. Notice how it said if a triangle. Now they're going to say if a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So they just took the words that were right here and they moved it in front of the if. They took the expression that was after the if and they moved it behind the then. And so that's what the converse is. So if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then the triangle is a right triangle. So that's what we're going to use to determine whether these lengths form a right triangle. So we're going to take the two shorter sides, 7 squared plus 24 squared. We're going to set that equal to 25 squared. So we'll have to do a little bit of math, and as we do that, we'll pull up our calculator, and we'll do some of the numbers that might be a little bit tough, like 24 and squaring that number. And there's my button. So that is 49, and then that other number was 576, so plus 576. And I know 25 squared is 625, so that's why it's kind of nice to memorize some of them. And when we do add these two numbers, we do get 625, and it equals 625. So what that tells us is, and this is the statement that we'll end up using, since, and then we can put the numbers in there, 7 squared plus 24 squared equals 25 squared, then the triangle is a right triangle. And so that's the statement that we're going to use each time for whether it is or it's not. So let's take a look at the next one, and it says 30, 40, and 45, so we plug those numbers in. So 30 squared plus 40 squared equals 45 squared. So 30 squared I know is 900, plus 40 squared I know is 1600, but the calculator might help us out for the 45, and squaring that number gives us 2025, so 2025. So once we add these two numbers together, I get 2500, and I see right away, yeah, it's too big. It does not equal 2025. So our statement is this: since 7 squared plus 24 squared, oops, not 7 squared anymore, let's fix that, it's the other number we're using, 30 squared plus 40 squared does not equal 45 squared. The triangle, or then the triangle is not a right triangle. So that's our statement we'll use for that situation. Now let's take a look at the next one. Same sort of thing, just different numbers. We have 21.6, we got a square, plus 28.8 will square, and this all equals 36 squared. So when we go ahead and multiply the 21.6 and squared, we get 466.56. And we'll go ahead and square the next number, we get 829.44. And this all equals 36 squared, which is 1296. So when I go ahead and add these two numbers together, I do get 1296. So when I get the same numbers again, our statement is this: since 21.6 squared plus 28.8 squared equals the 36 squared, then the triangle is a right triangle. Well, looking at the next type, it gives us a little word problem about a ramp starting 8 meters from the base of a staircase. So let's draw what we've got. So we've got 8 meters from the base of a staircase. So here's like the base of the staircase here. So this is 8 meters. And it says that the staircase is 1 meter high, so up 1 meter. And so what they want us to know is what is the length of the wheelchair ramp. So the ramp kind of goes down an angle like this. And so they want to find this length. Well, what we have here is a right triangle. And so we want to find the side opposite the right angle, so that's our C value. That is our wheelchair ramp. So we go ahead and plug in our numbers into the Pythagorean theorem. We got 1 squared plus 8 squared equals C squared. 1 plus 64 equals C squared, and we can add those two numbers and we get 65 equals C squared. Well, looking at what they want us to round to the nearest tenth. So what we'll need is when we take the square root of both sides, we'll need at least to the hundredths place. So let's see what number we get. So we go ahead and do that square root, we get 8.06, and then the number continues on. So that's the value of C. So we're going to call that 8.1 since I'm rounding to the nearest tenths. So that's the value of C. So let's go ahead and write a little statement. We could say the wheelchair ramp is, and then we just use the number 8 1/10 meters in length. So again, the whole idea is just write some sort of statement expressing what that answer represents. Let's take a look at our next problem here, and it talks about the city of Chicago is located at 4.8 on a grid. So if you've got the grid problem, what I would do, we're going to end up just sketching a little grid. If you'd want to use a coordinate plane and actual graph paper, you could. However, I'm going to just kind of give myself an idea about what's going on. So I know I've got to go 4 spaces over, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up 8 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that is going to be Chicago up here. Now Memphis is 6 spaces over, so a couple other spaces over, but 16 spaces down, so it's going to be somewhere way down here. Now these numbers are pretty far apart, but if you look at it, and so what I want to find is the distance between these two. Now if you look at it, we've got ourselves a right triangle. It's going to be a little bit tricky to draw here because they're kind of close together. But right there is our right angle, and the side opposite is our C value here, and that's the distance between the two. Now to help figure out how to find this number, is I want to find a distance, the distance straight down. Well, these are the y components that are going straight down. So whenever I want to find a distance, I subtract. And so I'm going to take the y components, negative 12, and I'm going to take away 8. And that's going to give me a negative number the way I've got it set up, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to square that number, because that is my either my A or B value. And then I'm going to add on the other one, which is between these two, the x components. And so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to subtract the two x components. So again, this was an x component here and an x component, so I'm subtracting those. This was the y component, this was the y component, so I'm subtracting those. But then once I subtract, I square, and this will equal C squared. So I go ahead and do this work. I get negative 20, but that's okay because I'm going to square it, and that gives me 400. And then over here, I end up getting 2, and I square it, and I get 4. This all equals C squared. So I go ahead and add the two numbers. I get 404 equals C squared, and then I go ahead and take the square root. And that gives me C is about, when I do the work, it's going to be pretty close to 20, but remember, we want to round to the nearest tenth. So I'm going to go ahead and go all the way to the hundredths place. So that number gives me 20.09. So that 9 tells me I need to round up. So here's our little statement we would say. Memphis and Chicago are 20.1 units. We don't know what the units are, we'll just say units apart on the grid. Well, looking at our last problem here, it says the sides of a flag are, and then they give us some numbers, 1.2 feet, 1.6 feet, and 2 feet. Are the flags made in the shape of a right triangle? So are they? And so they want to use the converse of the Pythagorean theorem. So let's go ahead and substitute our numbers in there. We take the two smaller sides, because those are always the sides connected by the right angle, and we square them and add them together. The longest side, the hypotenuse, is always by itself one side of the equal sign. So we'll go ahead and do some work there. We got 1.44 when I square the 2, and then I go ahead and square the 1. When I square the 1.2, when I square the 1.6, I end up with 2.56. This all equals 4. So I go ahead and add these two numbers together, and sure enough, I do get 4. So when I get the two numbers equal, that means I can say since 1.2 squared plus 1.6 squared equals 2 squared, then the flag is in the shape of a right triangle. So those are the types of problems you're going to see on tonight's homework. Good luck.